we are our own savior. We can outsource that trust. We can seek it and everything external to ourselves. But the more that we do that, the more we're going to experience that lack of safety. 4.5 years into the degree, 6 months away from being fully qualified, around $40,000 in student debt had been accumulated as well. The more that I found myself avoiding the decision to leave my degree and leave my job, the more unsettling that feeling became. If I wasn't going to change anything, then my mental health was going to really deteriorate by staying in that position that I was currently in.
From broke to making more than $100,000 online in 8 months, how that journey looked like?
I wasn't thinking about sustainability. I wasn't thinking about the big picture. I was just thinking about getting to that big milestone that I had set for myself. And whilst I think hustle is so important, I think hustle is important in relation to sustainability, which was a big lesson that I learned very early in my business journey.
Emily Jane Saroff, welcome to the Deeply Aligned podcast.
Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you here. I really loved your story as I was looking into your social media profiles, and yeah, I really vibed with the story of, you know, transitioning from a graduate, you've been an architecture graduate turned entrepreneur. So one of my first questions would be like, why did you decide to become an entrepreneur instead of continuing on that path of architecture?
Yeah, great question. And I mean, if you've ever heard of the sunk cost fallacy, it's like so many people experience this, right? Where you've invested so much time, money, and energy into something that it's really hard to step away from. Well, that was something I was experiencing at that time because I had invested like almost 5 full years into that path. I was 4.5 years into the degree, 6 months away from being fully qualified. And I had also invested, you know, around $40,000 in student debt had been accumulated as well. So there was a lot of reasons why I could have stayed and finished that degree. But the biggest thing that made me step away was that I felt this internal pull into another direction. And that pull was creating this massive inner conflict for myself because, you know, my head was saying, stay in the degree, keep going forward. It's only 6 months left. You've invested so much. You can't quit now. But my heart was like really pulling me in a direction of exploring something that was connected to a new passion that I had discovered at that time. And that inner conflict continued to grow and grow and grow. And the more that I found myself, you know, avoiding the decision to leave my degree and leave my job, the more unsettling that feeling became. And it actually would begin to build to a point where I started to future pace and see that if I wasn't going to change anything, then my mental health was going to really deteriorate by staying in that position that I was currently in. So it was largely that internal pull that I was feeling. And, you know, it's the Deeply Aligned podcast that's here. And that feeling that I felt was deep misalignment with the path that I was on. And that feeling that was pulling me into this other direction was that deep alignment, you know, with something that I knew was more on purpose for me.
Yeah. And I resonate so much with that. I have a very similar story myself. Not that we're going to go into that one today. But what do you think made you realize that there was misalignment? Like, what was the pivotal moment of now the friction started to grow?
You know, I had spent so much time in my degree and I had spent over a year in the job that I was in as well. I was almost 2 years into my architecture job. And I would find myself sitting at that cubicle inside the office, just thinking, wow, I really wish I'm not here 5 years from now. You know, like I would project 5 years into the future and the idea of being in that same position, it just didn't sit right with me. It didn't feel good. It didn't light me up. It didn't excite me, you know, and that was really the biggest thing was I'm a real visionary. And so every time that I would future project and think about where I wanted to be, what I wanted to be doing, it didn't look like the reality that I was living in. And it didn't look like the path that I was at that time following. So it was that idea of, you know, what is it going to cost me staying in this position? What is it going to cost me if I don't change anything? It's going to cost me my health. It's going to cost me my spark and joy for life, you know, being in this position that I really don't want to be in and forcing myself to be in this position just to please other people. And at the time, it was really, you know, my parents and my boss, like all of these, significant authority figures in my life, like that was who I was doing that for. And when I really asked myself the question of, well, what do I want? Where do I want to be? It was outside of that environment that I was in. So that would really be that thing that, drove me to make that change.
Yeah. It's such a good lesson, right? If we compare sunk cost to the opportunity cost. Like, what is the cost of letting things go? Of like whether you've been in this degree for years and you spent tens of thousands of dollars on your degree, that is the sunk cost, right? But what is the opportunity cost that you're potentially giving up? Meaning, what is the kind of future you could have where you are more aligned, where you are enjoying what you're doing? That comparison is something not a lot of people do. And I think it's something that needs to be brought up to light.
I think a lot of people don't realize that because we're not really taught it. I mean, personally, I was never really taught to think about the opportunity cost. It was something that through doing my own personal development, I really started to come across and understand myself. And I feel like when fear is present for people, it's very hard to be clear on what that opportunity cost is because you're so distracted by a different emotion which is present in that moment, being that fear. And so if you can really guide yourself to look beyond the fear that you're experiencing in that moment of like wanting to make that decision to do something else, and you can look beyond that, that's when you can start to see the opportunity that's on the other side. But as long as you're blinded by fear, you don't actually know what else is out there and what else you could be missing because you're so stuck, in that bubble.
Yes, totally. How much fear would you say you had at that moment? Was that one of your hardest decisions to make in your life?
Yeah, that was at the time, that was the hardest decision I ever had to make in my life. I was 22 years old at that point. I was still living at home. Like I hadn't really ever had to make any big decisions on my own. And I think the scariest thing about that decision wasn't the actual stepping away from the degree and starting something new. It was just having to put that level of self-trust in myself. I trust that this decision that I'm making for myself is the right decision, and trusting that even if it doesn't work out, I will be okay. And I think that was the scariest thing to do at that time, because that was the first major moment in my life where I was, there's so many opportunities I had that really helped build self-trust. But that was the first major test for me as a young adult to actually really fully embody that self-trust.
Yeah, full ownership and responsibility. How did it look on the support side of things from friends and from parents and family?
Yeah, it's interesting because of that fear that was coming up. I wasn't very vocal about like what my plans were to people. I didn't really want to talk about it to too many people. There were maybe like some friends that I had that were within the entrepreneurial space in the network marketing realm that I was having some conversations with, but a lot of it was like internal. A lot of it was like me having those conversations with myself. And so when it came to that point where I had to actually like take action and lean into this, I knew that it was going to go one of two ways. Either I was going to be really well supported by my family, by my friends, by my boss, or there was going to be a bit of pushback. And in order for me to take that step forward, I had to accept that there could be potentially pushback, and I had to be okay with there being potential pushback. Now, thankfully for me, I didn't end up receiving that pushback. When I told my parents about my decision and when I told my boss about my decision, I received the same like warmth and support from all of them, because they know how ambitious and how focused I am. And that when I put my mind to something, I always make it work. So they actually had such a deep level of trust in me based off how I had, built myself to be up until that point where they did support me. Sure, there was some maybe little fears that they did have, but it wasn't anything that would ever stop them from, cause them to hold me back from moving forward with what I wanted to be doing.
That's really nice and really important. Very valuable, of course. So yeah, from broke to making more than $100,000 online in 8 months. Tell us about how that journey looked like.
That was a roller coaster journey, that one. Because at that time, like 22 years old, I never really had any savings. I definitely didn't have a well-paying job because I was, still studying full time. And that's why I was living at home, because I wasn't really financially independent at all at that time. And so when I made that decision to obviously leave my degree, I had a big drive. And the thing that was driving me was I need to get to six figures as quickly as I can to prove to myself and to everyone else that this business works and that I can actually do this thing. And so I was very much driven by ego and also, I guess, fear at that time as well, right? Because my ego was like, how much money can I make as young as I can, as quickly as I can? So that was what my ego was driving me by. But then there was this element of fear of like, well, if this business doesn't work out, I'm going to have to go back to my degree. I'm going to have to go back to my job. And I don't want that to happen. So it was a bit of a cocktail of ego and fear that was driving me to reach six figures at the time. And it probably wasn't the healthiest cocktail to be drinking because that then led me to obviously push and sacrifice everything that I could, in order to get to that goal. I wasn't thinking about sustainability. I wasn't thinking about the big picture. I was just thinking about getting to that big milestone that I had set for myself. And so there was a lot of hustle. There was a lot of drive. I was so focused. I was working overtime. I had no boundaries, to be completely honest. And whilst I think hustle is so important, I think hustle is important in relation to sustainability. And just at that time, I didn't have that sustainability piece. So once I had hit my first six figures, I did it in the 8 months. I then also immediately burnt myself out because that sustainability piece was missing, which was a big, big, big lesson that I learned very early in my business journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a conversation in itself, and that we can definitely go deeper on later on here with the hustle and grind mentality, which is very important in the beginning, whether that's monk modes or being focused for many hours and honing in the skills and make things move forward. But yeah, there's other dark side to that too. What was your plan as you dropped out? Did you have a plan established before you dropped out? What were you gonna do? What were you selling? Was it services or was it coaching immediately?
Yeah, so I had some idea, but I didn't really have the full idea. So when I dropped out of my degree, the first thing that I was creating for myself in doing that was just creating some space to actually figure things out, because in that degree that I was in, it was like working overtime. I was studying all the time, then I had my job, and then I was staying up until, 5 a.m. the next morning just to get assignments done. So I didn't really have any emotional, mental, or physical capacity to be planning a business at that point. So the first thing was get myself out of the degree and create space to think of a plan. And so then that's when I created the space for me to be able to figure out, what do I actually want to be selling? I did a big brainstorm, like a big mind map, and thought of all these different avenues like products and coaching and courses and you name it. It was on the brainstorm. And from there, it was really then about me deciding, okay, what's the most logical first step for me to take from this brainstorm that's going to allow me to build my income, the quickest, so that I can actually do this with minimal investment financially and maximum return. And so then that's where I really found the direction of coaching. And at that time, I had my podcast, the Empower With Them podcast, which was the thing that pulled me out of my career path that I was on. So I figured, well, if I'm already indirectly coaching people on a podcast, why don't I just start directly coaching people one-to-one on the same topics of mindset and personal development? So that's where that initial idea from my business came from. But then I also realized I didn't actually know how to grow an online business. I didn't know how to coach. I didn't know how to market myself. I didn't know how to create an offer, sell an offer. I had zero experience in all of that. So then I came across my next big decision was, do I try to figure out this all on my own and spend the time trying to put that plan in place and get the strategy myself? Or do I want to invest my entire savings that I've got as my security blanket right now into someone who has the strategy, has the plan, so that I can save the time and I can get that result quicker? And so I made that decision to invest my full $10,000 in savings. And I put that all into my very first business coach. And so from there, I then had the strategy. I also had the confidence. So the strategy was one thing, but I had the confidence and the certainty within myself that the actions that I were taking were going to be moving me in the right direction, which I actually believe was one of the biggest things that allowed me to see the result. It wasn't the strategy itself. It was having that certainty and reassurance that I'm being led by someone who knows what they're doing, and therefore I am moving in the right direction.
Yeah. I think they talk a lot about that in Think and Grow Rich. It always comes to mind with like definiteness of purpose and then belief in it. And then obviously taking action afterwards with consistency and discipline. With that investment, that's obviously leading by example of like you're thinking that other people are going to invest into you, coaching them. And here you're leading by example of, well, if I believe in coaching so much, then maybe I should invest into a coach myself. Yeah. What did that look like exactly? So $10,000, was it a period of how many months and breakdown of the payment plan?
That was how many weeks is it? I think it was 10 weeks that I was in that program for. So it's a two and a half month program. It was a mastermind, it was quite a big mastermind as well. So it wasn't like, it was close proximity 1-to-1. But I'm the kind of person who I'm very self-led, right? And I think where a lot of new business owners maybe struggle with their first investments is making the wrong investments in terms of proximity that they get. So like if you're someone who needs to be handheld more and you get lost in crowds easily, then it's important to have more of an intimate level of support. But for me, I thrived really well in that mastermind because that gave me proximity to people who were doing what I wanted to be doing, making more money than I had ever heard of someone making before in my life. And that community piece was something that really fueled me because I lacked community in my direct environment because no one else in my immediate family or friendship circle was doing the entrepreneurial thing. And so that was a big piece for me as to why that level of proximity really allowed me to thrive.
Definitely. We learn by osmosis, right? Surrounding ourselves with like-minded people or even people that's several steps ahead of us to, really like share their beliefs of what's possible and then go like, these people are not too much different than me. I can do the same, if not better.
Yeah. And another thing with that too, right? Because I know there might be some people listening to this who are like, well, I don't have $10,000 in my bank account to go and invest in a mentor. First of all, don't tell yourself that. It doesn't matter if you don't have the cash liquid. There's always ways to get resourceful and find a way to get access to that support that you need. But if financially you are really like stuck in a hard place where you can't get the loan or you can't, find alternative ways to really make it work, one thing that I did at the time, obviously having my podcast, was I leveraged that. I leveraged my podcast to get me into one-to-one proximity with really big people. I was getting onto podcast interviews every single week with multiple different business owners who were all doing 6, 7, and 8 figures in their businesses. And I was sitting in that setting, just like we are here right now, but I was asking the questions. I was picking their brain. I was deconstructing and understanding and unpacking like what has made them so successful. What do they do in their marketing or their branding, or what's their mindset like? What are the thoughts they're thinking, their daily habits? And so if you don't have the funds to pay for mentorship, go and start a podcast and start inviting people who are doing what you want to be doing onto your platform so that you can give them exposure to your audience at the same time as you being able to, on a one-to-one level, really pick and dissect their brain and figure out what made them so successful.
Totally. One of the greatest lessons I got from a recent mastermind was that do whatever you can to get in the room. Get in the room with smart people. And that doesn't mean that it always has to be financially. It usually is most of the time, but it can also be that you're investing your time to get in the room with that, building relationships so you can get in the room, so you can get to spend time with that person that you want to learn from.
Yeah, relationship building has been one of my biggest goals of this year, really networking and getting into physical rooms. And it's really interesting when I look back towards the start of the year, saying yes to get into one room then opened doors to another and then another and then another. And then all of a sudden I'm at an event, networking with Jeremy Minor, Daniel G, like these big players, all because of the yeses that I was saying yes to at the start of the year, leading me to meet the next person, then the next person, and the next person, and the next person. And if you can be really open-minded to actually put yourself into spaces and create opportunities for yourself that can then connect you with someone else who might lead you to your next milestone, be doing that, and you don't need to be spending money to be able to do that. In fact, the way that I got into a room with Jeremy Miner and Daniel G was by offering myself to the person who was hosting that space, volunteering my time to actually help them set up and run that event. So there was zero investment for me to get into that proximity. Instead, all I did was I invested my time into supporting someone else.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's a lot of valuable lessons in there. What was some of the most important early insights or discoveries or belief breakers that you got from your coach there, or in that mastermind, the 10 weeks, that really propel things forward?
Yeah, if I think back to that very first mastermind, probably one of the biggest things I took away from that was the importance of hustling. But at the same time, one of the biggest lessons I got from that was the importance of sustainability when hustling, because I was very much taught, like, we talk about masculine, feminine energies, all of that. This mentor that I had was, very masculine in his approach to business, right? And in that, there was, whether it was potentially something that was misteaching or something that I just completely didn't bother paying attention to myself because of what was driving me at that time, I took that hustle piece and I didn't take the sustainability piece. I didn't take the longevity piece. So the biggest lesson that I got from that container was the importance of hustling in order to grow fast, but then also the importance of hustling in a sustainable way where you'll be able to continue to grow your success and not just crash and burn once you reach that checkpoint.
Right. Yeah. With the hustle, what did you bring that energy? In what direction did you focus that energy and that amount of time that you put in?
Yeah, the energy was fully focused towards that milestone I had set for myself. Like, I knew my potential. I knew that the life I had been living, the career I had been in, the degree I was studying didn't fully match the potential that I could see for myself. I know that I knew at the time that I wanted to be speaking on global stages and influencing people in a really positive way on a global scale. And the reality I was living was never really going to facilitate that for me. So I was so focused on that destination, not just the first milestone in the six figures, but the big picture. Like, what was the 10-year vision, the lifetime vision that then that first six figures was going to lead me to? And so that's really where my focus was when hustling, was towards where I wanted to go. And I'm really having this attitude of I would sacrifice anything to get there. And that attitude in itself was one that I learned after reaching the checkpoint, that it's not really an attitude I want to have towards business, because I learned that, what's the point in reaching the milestone if you don't feel, the way that you want to feel when you get there? And it comes back to feeling deeply aligned. I didn't feel deeply aligned when I made my first six figures because I had sacrificed my values. And true alignment is like living a life that is actually incongruent with those values that you have, right? So that was probably like the biggest thing for me at that point.
Gotcha. Now, what I'm trying to get to as well is some of the action points that you checked off going forward. There was like, okay, I need to structure a really good offer. Then I need to create content. I need to drive traffic. I need to do outreach. Or I need to try paid ads. Or what did that look like?
Yeah, so I can break it down so simply and really just focus on three core things: having a really compelling and irresistible offer, becoming an absolute master at your branding and marketing. And I'm going to group them into one pillar, even though branding and marketing, they are two separate things, but we'll focus on that as just like pillar number two. And then number three is having a solid sales system in place. You need to make sure you have an offer that is actually what your audience wants and actually speaks into the needs, the transformation that they're looking for. But then you need to know how to communicate that offer and the fact that you have a solution for them through your branding and your marketing. Once you're able to communicate that, then you're going to start attracting those leads that you really want to be working with. And then it's about learning how to actually close those leads. So they're really the three core foundations that if you're brand new to business right now, you really want to learn how to master, wrap your head around it, study those three pillars as much as you possibly can, because that's what you need to rinse and repeat in order to get to that first six-figure mark.
Yeah, makes sense. What do you think was your biggest bottleneck there in the first 8 months? Like once you solve that particular bottleneck, obviously those three pillars are all necessary and sort of equally important. Without one missing, it's no way you you get a success. But what was your bottleneck there?
I would say that my bottleneck was actually the energy piece. My bottleneck was definitely my energy piece because I had the lack of boundaries. I had let go of my gym routine. I wasn't looking after myself properly because I was staying up until ridiculous hours. And it was like I was back in university again. And that became my bottleneck because it reached a point where I didn't physically have the capacity to continue to market and to continue to sell, and to continue to show up on social media. And that actually stopped me from being able to go further than what I did at that point. There was like physical health issues that were coming up for me. I thought that I was having a heart attack one night, at 22 years old, being rushed to the emergency room thinking you're having a heart attack. That's a bit of a red flag right there. Like that something needs to change. Thankfully, it wasn't a heart attack. It was just like stress-induced cramps. But like I was physically bottlenecking myself because I wasn't looking after my energy and my health. And I really disregarded the importance of health and energy management because, again, I was just so focused on wanting to grow as quickly as you can, but you cannot grow quickly if you're not actually fueling yourself and nurturing the vessel that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it kind of takes us back a little bit to the hustle and grind conversation as well. Many people think about that it's about the time you put in, of like, let me put in 8 hours a day and work hard and hard work ethic and be focused. But in the end of the day, it's all about energy management. Because if you can manage your energy well, you can know what times of the day you're more inclined to be able to be productive and sharp in your mind. And other times and other periods, you're more creative. And other times you need to rest and recover. So what do you think about that, the energy management part?
Completely. And energy management is something that I did a lot of work on for myself, particularly after learning how to set those boundaries. For me, I'm the kind of person who needs time to switch off, fully recharge, and for that first 8 months, I wasn't even giving myself any days on the weekend off. I was working Monday to Monday on my business. And then, putting a boundary in place where I then said to myself, okay, I'm at least taking Sundays off. I'm at least taking Sundays off to just do me and have fun and enjoy myself. Like that was one of the first big things I needed to do for my own energy management. But when it also comes to energy management around different tasks you do in your business, one thing that I really learned is I had to separate creative tasks from more of like the analytical tasks because, switching between those two different sides of your brain, it doesn't really support productivity and efficiency to its highest. Now, for me, that meant then planning content and creating offers in a certain window of time, which was separate to then where I would be doing like sales activity or DMs or tracking of finances, right? And so that for me is probably the biggest way that I manage my own energy is in separating different tasks based off which part of my brain is going to be leveraged the most for it.
Yeah, I hear you. So yeah, before the camera started rolling here, you said you just came from another podcast. So obviously, it sounds like you're structuring your days already. Putting things together with one podcast after another, one creative thing after the other. How does your days look like?
Yeah, no, it's true. Like with my schedule, I have set days for set activities, right? Because I know Mondays, for starters, is my CEO day. So I actually don't book in any like client meetings or sales calls on that day. The only calls that I will do are my team meetings because that's the zone that I'm in where I'm planning, I'm reviewing, I'm auditing, and I'm supporting my team. Then I've got Tuesdays and Thursdays, which are a little bit more creative days. So that's really where I'll do client calls or I'll do podcast calls and I'll try to put them back to back on those days. So Tuesdays might be a full day of client calls and then Thursday might be a full day of podcast calls so that I can be fully in that zone. And then I keep my Wednesdays and my Fridays fully open for sales calls or just excess space that I might need for different creation tasks. And again, the reason why I separate sales calls from other calls in the week is because that's a totally different zone that I need to be in, right? And so I really look at my week, Monday to Friday, and go, how can I block each of these days to support certain tasks that are really grouped within similar kinds of energy and ways of thinking.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Thanks for all these sharings. Let's go into the future a little bit, or well, present/future. What is your biggest focus on these days?
So it's really two things. If I'm thinking like big picture, I'm really working towards speaking on global stages and doing keynote speeches, in front of crowds of tens of thousands of people. That's always been a vision of mine. Since before I even got into the business space. I didn't quite understand that vision before the business space though, but it's something that I've always loved doing. So that's really like the big picture of, the impact of how I share my voice and how I use my voice and my story to really inspire and empower other people. And then I'm also doing a lot of work within the branding space specifically at the moment. So creating events of my own and really bringing my brand to life in a physical environment, but also supporting other business owners and, the creation and the design of their own brand and how they can bring that into everything else they're doing within their businesses also.
All right. So yeah, more physical events, speaking at events, running your own events with networking. I know you have one that is called Mentors and Mimosas, right?
Yeah, that's correct. We did that. It was the other week. It was last week. We had our second ever Mentors and Mimosas evening, which sold out again. So that was great.
That's awesome. What is the vision for that?
Yeah, the vision for Mentors and Mimosas, that one there is like a fun event, right? Like I created that because I felt like after being in the entrepreneurial space for years, it was almost as though, you're sitting behind a computer screen on your own inside of this box with four walls, right? And I wanted to create a way where I could get off my computer and get in person and actually like be feeling that physical connection with people, be networking face to face, being able to hug people and feel the energy in a room and really create an environment where other entrepreneurs could do that as well. So that's really the vision and the mission behind Mentors and Mimosas, is to be able to create that space for entrepreneurs to come together, to connect, to grow, to get inspired and just have fun, have an excuse to get dressed up and get out of your office for a night.
Yeah. It's super underrated, right? I mean, that should be one of the reasons why we're doing this, because we're feeling more of this positive energy and emotions, right? That is really. What else would you say is your mission with your online coaching business?
My mission, it really just comes back to like the name, I guess, empower with them. My mission really is just to empower other people to realize the potential that exists within them and give them that permission to be able to go out there and start living a life that's fully in alignment with that potential. And it's really funny because when I started the Empower with Them podcast, like my focus was so much external. It was so much on how can I empower other people. But now that I've been on this journey for like almost 4 years, I've really realized how massive of a journey of like self-empowerment it's really been as well. So my mission is to just, I guess, be that light for myself. Whenever I think about my highest self, if someone asks me the question, who is that person that inspires you to go and do the thing that you want to be doing? My answer is always my highest self. And that might sound, I don't know, too self-conceited or whatever, but it's true, because when I think about that person who's driving me to show up and tap into my full potential and continue to push towards the goals that I want to achieve, I'm thinking about that version of myself who has done everything that, she possibly could have done in her lifetime. And that's the version of me that empowers me to go and do what I want to do and live the life that I want to live for myself. And so my mission with my business is to be that person for someone who can't right now connect with that version of themselves. Instead, I want them to be able to see the potential of what they can have in their life through witnessing it through me, so that can be the permission slip for them to start to actually see that version of themselves, their higher self, as that potential version that's out there for them to step into also.
Yeah, that's where everything starts, right? I mean, do you have any practices that you're consistently doing for yourself to remind yourself of your highest self, what you're looking to progress towards Any vision boards? Any other practices?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's been so many times in my journey where I've been very anchored into these sorts of practices, and other times where I've been quite inconsistent with them myself. And the funny thing, if I'm reflecting on it, is those times where I've been inconsistent with those practices have been the times where I haven't felt the best in business. The times where I have been anchored into that vision and been crystal clear on where I'm going and committing to those daily rituals, that's been the times where I've then been thriving the most in business. So my current rituals around this is just creating some space in the mornings for myself to sit and be present, and to really reflect on what is that I am moving towards? Where do I want to be? What do I want to be creating? And what do I need to change today to help me get there? But I also have on my wall in front of me on the other side of the room, so every time I look up from my computer screen, it's a piece of paper that just says 5-year vision. And then I've got 3 different arrows coming off it with 3 different things that I want to accomplish in the next 5 years. It's just like that little anchor as well. And that's something that I've always done in my journey. I've either had a sticky note that has a goal on it or something else, and I've just put it somewhere where I can unconsciously look at it. I'll be going through my day and I'll look up and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I'm working towards. And I'd say that right there is probably the most simple thing that anyone could do to keep you anchored and tied into where you are going.
Yeah. Yes. Why do you think that works? I mean, there's so much thing out there, right? From Joe Dispenza or many other people who's talking about manifestation or reality creation, or everything starts with thoughts, but then feeling is the secret, and so forth, back and forth. What would you say in your words why that is important and why it works so well?
I think, simply put, the reason why it works so well is just so you don't forget. There's so many things that we've got to do in our day-to-days. There's so many thoughts that stack up of tasks, but then also just thoughts of well, I've got to eat, I've got to breathe, I've got to shower, I've got to brush my teeth, I've got to go talk to this person and do that. And so many things stack up within our mind on a conscious and unconscious level that it can be easy to actually forget what your goals are. And so as simple as it is, just writing it down, it's that simple reminder to be yes, that's what I'm doing. That's where I'm going. And I even actually after my first year of business, I got a little tattoo on my wrist, which is just the number 22. And I remember at that time, I got that tattoo because I was 22 years old and I started my business. And then I think it was 2022 when it was the end of my first year or something. But there was lots of twos at the time. And so I was like, well, I'm going to get that, tattooed on me as one of those little reminders so that I never forget where I started and where I'm going. So, you don't need to go and get a tattoo on yourself to remind yourself of your goals. You could start by just getting a little sticky note, writing it down, putting it in the places where you go frequently in your day to just make sure that you don't forget.
Yeah.
Because it can be easy to forget.
It can be really easy. And if we don't forget consciously, we might forget subconsciously and so forth. I'm curious, since you're talking about numbers there, 22, I'm not sure if that's related to anything like that more than your age at the time. But have you looked into much when it comes to stuff like 16 personalities test, Enneagram, human design, astrology, numerology?
Human design vaguely. But I haven't looked too deeply into numerology and all of that. But I feel like I should, because I think the twos were very significant for me with a large portion of my journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's fascinating for sure. So I would recommend anyone to look into that for themselves, because there's a lot of self-discovery on most of those areas. It's quite crazy. When it comes to, we've been talking about it all the whole call, but what does deeply aligned mean to you?
I've thought a lot over the years about what being in deep alignment really does mean to me. And I think it's a couple of things, right? But largely, I believe it's a feeling. Being deeply aligned is a feeling, feeling like the things that you're doing in all aspects of your life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's your career, whether it's your health, feeling like all of these aspects of your life are fueling your being and moving you in a direction that aligns with that potential. So for me, being deeply aligned is being able to feel that connection, to where you're going, to who you are. It's a big journey of self-discovery. Finding your true alignment is really a big journey of just discovering your true self and acting in congruence with your true self.
So well said. So well said. I'm thinking back about my journey and your journey as well. What is a good advice to people that might be stuck in a certain situation, whether that's a degree, whether that's a job, whether it's a relationship or anything else, and they feel a bit off? They don't feel completely aligned and loving in what they're doing. What's an advice from you there of like how one can feel into their intuition and maybe make some changes?
Just trust yourself. Just trust yourself, right? If you feel that something is off, trust that feeling and give yourself permission to get curious and actually explore that, right? Explore what doesn't feel right about the reality you're in right now, the relationship, the career, the degree, whatever it may be. What doesn't feel aligned with where you are right now? And if you were to start to think about and get creative, around how you would want that thing to look and feel, what does that look like? And then trust what comes up there and trust yourself that even if you take a step forward and turns out it doesn't lead you exactly where you want to be, you will be all right. And that taking that step forward is then leading you that little bit closer to where you are meant to be as well. So trust in yourself, trust in the journey, and give yourself permission to be curious and explore something else.
Yeah. I think that's a lesson that pre-20-year-old M and pre-20-year-old Chris would want to hear. Yeah. But if you were to give another lesson to your younger self, what would that be?
I would say the other lesson that's coming up is to focus on sustainability, not speed. Speed is great if done sustainably, but you can't do speed without sustainability. Otherwise, you're not going to maintain whatever you do create. So to focus on sustainability first, once you've got those foundations of figuring out what is sustainable picture, then start to pump the speed into that.
Yeah, I like that. Nice. Is there anything else that we haven't touched upon that you would like us to go into?
It feels pretty complete, to be honest, like based off what we've really spoken into in my story and the direction that we went, it feels pretty complete. So I guess maybe like the final thing that I would say is whether you're new to business, like looking to start a business now, or maybe you've been in business for a while, I really do urge everyone to begin to deepen the relationship they have with themselves and with self-trust, because you will only allow yourself to go as far in business as far as you trust yourself, right? And if you don't trust yourself to be able to get to the 6 figures or to the 7 figures or whatever that may be, then that's never going to be your reality. So if you can work on your relationship with yourself, and I'm doing a lot of self-work to deepen my own trust with myself so that I trust and feel safe to be able to be a 7-figure business owner myself, right? Like that's one of the biggest keys in the process is building that relationship, learning to trust yourself and learning to feel safe in holding yourself through the journey.
Yeah. I think we had this conversation many times before on the podcast, and I think it's worth mentioning again, where everyone thinks of this safety net as I have my degree or I have a regular incoming salary. And of course, that is a safety net. You can have a safety net with the support of your parents as well. But maybe the biggest safety net out of all is this more mental safety net where you believe in your ability to figure things out and you believe in yourself. That is the biggest safety net that one can have.
Yeah. Someone said to me, it was before I went traveling solo for a little while there. I was, saying a bit nervous, like, what if my business doesn't survive while I'm traveling? And and the best advice they gave me was like realizing that we are our own saviors. We can outsource that trust, we can seek it in everything external to ourselves. But the more that we do that, the more we're going to experience that lack of safety, right? Because the true safety comes from trusting in yourself and going within and really tapping into your own personal power and and holding yourself in that. So yeah, completely.
Yeah, like empowering yourself, right? Or taking ownership to the fullest degree, because that is really the transition from, I guess, a regular 9 to 5 could be, or from school or degree, where now if you're going to start a business, you're going to have to take a lot of more responsibility and be more accountable and take more ownership, really, for your life.
Completely.
This has been a pleasure, Em. For a next guest, we're always trying to forward a question. What would be a question for you to a next guest without knowing who that guest would be?
Ooh. Question to the next guest would be, what was the greatest lesson you learned from the greatest challenge that you've experienced in your journey?
Amazing. That's a good one. Exactly. All right, following up on that one, what would be a guest you would like to see on this podcast, Deeply Aligned?
How big are we talking?
Endlessly big.
I'm going to put it out there that you're going to interview Jay Shetty one day.
Amazing. Yes. On the list now, yeah. Amazing. If people want to know and learn more about your world, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm super easy to find. Instagram's the best place. I'm at Empower with M. Otherwise, you can listen to my podcast, which is the Empower with M podcast.
Awesome. Check that out, guys. Instagram, and also check out her podcast. Super. This has been such a nice conversation, and thank you for coming on, really.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.